Donald Trump could say, you're fired. Let Martha Stewart run her company the same way and be the same way. Oh, evil. But Donald Trump, he gets to hang out with young and have 50 different wives and just be cool. Oh, Donald, we love you. Donald Trump. But when you're a girl, you have to be like everything. You have to be dope at what you do, but you have to be super sweet. And you have to be sexy, and you have to be this, and you have to be that, and you have to be nice, and you have to... It's like, I can't be all those things at once. I'm a human being. I don't mean to be ranting and raving like this. Don't use this footage, please. It's just gonna make me look stupid.
Well, I don't know what to say, but I will say that I am probably the president's #1 fan.
Over the last couple of weeks, I have heard so many conversations about Nicki Minaj. Was she always destined to be this way? Or is Nicki justified in her actions because the industry turned its back on her? Well, personally, I think it's something way more complex than either side would like to admit. I think what we're actually watching is the full-on radicalization of a GOAT. There are reasons why you can see clips on the internet of Nicki's politics being drastically different than the politics she currently espouses. I would argue that post Nicki Minaj's 2016 to 2019 hate train era, her politics have become even more extreme and grievance-based. This may help us better understand how the woman, the legend, the pop culture icon, who we once knew, has been reduced to a radicalized MAGA grifter. Once done with that, we'll end the video by examining the full magaification of Nicki and seeing if any of this shit fucking makes sense. That was a very long intro. Hello and welcome to the Denny Show. Today, we'll be examining the full-on radicalization of Nicki Minaj. We'll start off by examining Nicki's undocumented roots and her traumatic childhood and how that shaped the woman we now know as Nicki Minaj. And then we'll go ahead and examine Nicki's monumental rise in the industry. From Superbass to Starships to Moment for Life, how Nicki Minaj not only took over hip-hop, but took over the world. After breaking down Nicki's monumentous rise within the industry, we'll also examine the infamous hate train era and how that moment may have not only radicalized Nicki, but may be the explanation as to why she is now aligning with Donald Trump and MAGA politics. In that section, we'll examine Nicki's radicalization post-hate train era and how that moment in her life may have shaped her grievance-based politics that has now led her towards MAGAism.
Hi, my name is Nicki Minaj and I go to PS45. I like to be a nurse when I grow up so I can help people less fortunate than I am.
The story of Nicki Minaj is the story of an undocumented immigrant. Onika Tanya Mirage was born in the small country of Trinidad and Tobago. At age 3, both Nicki's parents left the country to come to America for a better life. While in Trinidad and Tobago, she stayed with her grandma and her 11 cousins. At age 5, Nicki's mother had finally saved up enough money to bring her kids to America. While Nicki's mother was extremely hardworking, Nicki's father, on the other hand, sadly had become addicted to Ronald Reagan's crack era epidemic. Depending on the substance her father would take, he would have 2 distinct personalities. If he was high on crack cocaine, he would have a more docile and approachable personality. But when he was drunk, he would turn extremely abusive, specifically towards Nicki's mother. In multiple instances, Nicki recounts having to stand directly in front of her mother as a way to protect her mother from her abusive father. In these moments where her father was extremely abusive, he would repeat the same ominous threat. He would threaten to burn down their house with Nicki's mother in it. In her 2012 Guardian interview, Nicki opened up about how using books and her imagination allowed her to escape her extremely traumatic childhood as a way to basically create a better life than the life she was currently experiencing. One of her first alter egos that she created was named Cookie. After multiple instances of abuse, Nicki's mother was finally able to escape her father and take her kids with her. Due to safety reasons, Nicki and her mother relocated multiple times as a way to escape her abusive father. But sadly, he was able to catch up to them, and he made good of his ominous threat. He set their house on fire, hoping that both Nicki's mother and the kids were inside. Lucky for Nicki and her siblings, they weren't in the house. The day prior, her mother had this really weird feeling and ended up sending Nicki and her siblings away to a loved one's house. But sadly, she was in the house. Lucky for Nicki's mother, she was able to escape.
My mother would let my father be violent with her. And she always brings up the story as a little girl. I would stand in front of my mother and go like this. And I vowed, like, that's why I'm, like, maybe some people would describe me as abrasive or bitchy or whatever, because I vowed from that age, no man would ever abuse me, call me out my name, treat me like that.
Now, even though Nicki's childhood was extremely traumatic, she was lucky enough to gain entrance into one of the best high schools in America, LaGuardia High School. Now, this is a school that is primarily for extremely talented and gifted kids. She initially auditioned for both singing and acting classes. Her singing, well, it fell flat. You get it? Because, like, it fell flat. You know what I mean? You get it? And while in LaGuardia, Nicki thrived. Around this time, Nicki sadly got pregnant. And after talking to people around her, she decided to get an abortion, something that she would later end up regretting. In her song Autobiography, Nicki not only recounts how her relationship with her father has traumatized her, she also touches on how traumatic her abortion was, therefore showcasing how this moment in her life has been extremely impactful in developing the woman we now know as Onika Tanya Mirage, or better known as Nicki Minaj.
You may be confused as to why a woman in 2018 who came out in protest against the Trump administration's child separation policy and let the world know that she's an undocumented immigrant would now be supporting those same exact policies, if not worse. That's the point of this video. Nicki's politics don't make linear sense because at some point, post her 2016 to 2019 hate train era, her politics became primarily about grievance. Who you calling a bitch? While Nicki Minaj was growing up in the state of New York, there was also something happening a few boroughs over. Female rap, like its male counterpart, was created in the 1970s with female rappers like Angie Davis and Sharaf. Later, we would see artists like MC Lyte and Salt and Pepper. And this was Nicki's early childhood. So she was inundated most likely with not only Trump propaganda, but also the burgeoning hip-hop scene. And at that young age, Nicki, well, she was intrigued.
Fate of the female MC is very shaky. It's been shaky for years, and that's just because females don't get as much exposure and as much perks as the guys, and that's just a fact.
Yes, that is the Brat Project in the background, and yes, it is supposed to act as a signifier as to how much I love female rap. Because in this section, we're going to go ahead and better examine how Nicki's rise in female rap wasn't just monumental because of Nicki, it was monumental for the entire genre.
At some point within female rap, there were upwards of 100 active female rappers. Every mainstream label and rap group had at least one female rapper in their crew, if not for the lyrical skill, just for the aesthetics. But at some point, we started to see this slowly but surely dwindle down. We went from having icons like Lil Kim and Foxy Brown and two of the largest labels and hip-hop groups at that time to having only a few female rappers active in the 2000s. Why?
According to Trina, one of the reasons why a lot of these labels stopped supporting female rappers has a lot to do with the fact that female rappers were too expensive to market, too expensive to tour and travel.
I've been in different meetings from the label, you know, being an artist that was signed to a major label, Atlantic Records, and with just the expenses. And this is why there's no categories in award shows for females, because if you got one artist, myself, that's out and nobody else to put up in the category, then there's no category.
According to the labels, it was too expensive to not only market a female rapper, but to actually have a female rapper on your roster. So you would have to pay for the makeup and the hair and the clothing. So the same labels and individuals that literally created the framework as to what constituted a female rapper were now complaining that there were too many rules in their framework.
Whether it was the 80s, the 90s, now, then, or even tomorrow. It's just not easy. You know, it takes a very special woman to be a female rapper.
Shout out to all my haters, because my haters give me so much ammunition. I just wrote some I mean, when I said I wrote some shit. said I'm the only underground bitch running from paparazzi. And I'm out of town, be swerving the Maserati. Stay around the white like a Nazi. Pussy popping on my papa so the cops.
She was in the group Hood Stars alongside her ex-boyfriend and former hype man, Savari Samuels. Even with the demise of Hood Stars, Nicki was still determined and started uploading her music on MySpace, hoping to gain traction and also build a mobile and durable fan base. One of those fans that she was gaining happened to be the founder of a local New York label called Dirty Money Entertainment. With her newfound industry connections, Nicki started dropping her iconic come-up freestyles. These freestyles stood out for a multitude of reasons. One, well, Nicki wasn't only lyrically gifted, she also had different voices, alter egos, different personalities, which led to her automatically standing out. Hoping to build off of the cultural cachet that she received with her come-up freestyles, Nicki dropped one of her first mixtapes, Playtime Is Over. She used this mixtape as a way to build a name for herself in the local New York hip-hop scene, as a way to showcase her talent, her dynamic lyrical skills. In 2008, Nicki released Sucker Free. Sucker Free built off of the success of Playtime Is Over. She doubled down on what she was good at and kept honing her theatrical skills. Beam Me Up Scotty was different. One of the main reasons why it was different is because it had the one and only itty bitty piggy. For a lot of young black girls like me or young queer kids, Itty Bitty Piggy wasn't just a song, it was a moment. And to this day, the song has managed to be a cult classic.
These girls running like I just threw the bouquet. They know I'm headed to the top like a toupee. Now all the bums is wondering where I be at. You ain't a Barbie, it's none of your freaking beeswax.
At some point, Nicki decided to start working alongside Deb Atney, the mother of Waka Flocka. She brought Deb on to be her manager. While working in Atlanta, Nicki was able to establish a working relationship with artists like Waka Flocka and Gucci Mane, someone who sadly would use his influence down the road to try to paint Nicki in a misogynistic and malicious light.
Because when I moved to Atlanta and she started managing me, Gucci would call me like every day, like, let's go to the studio, shot. I'm like, what? Just leave me alone, Gucci.
Gucci Mane is somebody who later comes into Nicki's story and uses this moment to try to paint a very malicious and very sexist narrative about Nicki and try to make it seem as though that he had some type of sexual relationship with Nicki at this time, which goes to show how malicious rumors and very sexist rumors like that in the industry can be weaponized against female rappers as a way to try to limit their careers, something that we would sadly see Nicki herself do in the later parts of her career.
Now, due to the success of her mixtapes, as well as her determination and her nonstop posting on MySpace, Nicki, slowly but surely, gained the attention of the man who was destined to change her life, Lil Wayne.
Like I said, he's still immune to DBT. He said, I got to have that girl shout it. Hey, yo, shout it. Yo, I want to meet Nick and shout it. And he met me.
Let me make something clear. Lil Wayne didn't make Nicki's career, but Lil Wayne did provide Nicki with the necessary cosign to take over the 2000s. If you weren't really there, you probably don't understand how big of an artist Lil Wayne was. He was untouchable. So Wayne using his influence to co-sign a female rapper from New York, especially at this moment when the industry was apprehensive in supporting female rappers, well, this was monumental for Nicki's career. The first time I heard Nicki was on her song Massive Attack. I remember seeing this really small, petite Trinidadian woman with this crazy wig alongside Amber Rose. And please keep in mind, this is before both of them went full MAGA. She was hyper feminine in almost a cartoonish and theatrical way. The wigs, as well as the clothes, were extremely bright and out there. Nicki's aesthetic builds off of legends like Lil Kim, but also combines her love for Asian culture, specifically Japanese and Korean culture. In this moment, when everybody was trying to act hard and tough, having this extremely hyper-feminine female rapper who came on these songs talking about how she had the biggest this and biggest that made her an automatic standout. Nicki Minaj has always been neurodivergent coded to me. And because of that, Nicki was representation for a little black girl like me who didn't really see that many individuals in pop culture or on TV that were as eclectic as neurodivergency could be. Nicki, with her colorful hair and her theatrics and her weird personality, was always something that I could connect with, and I bet a lot of other individuals could as well. Up until now, Nicki Minaj has never fully adopted the idea that she was neurodivergent. The second time I saw Nicki Minaj was the Bedrock music video. Now, the music video was was very important to me for a few reasons. On the first hand, I didn't actually expect to see Nicki again because as somebody that was into hip hop at a young age, I kind of understood something that became clearer to me as I've gotten older. The industry is not really a fan of women, especially Black women, especially at this time period. So Nicki having arguably the best verse, that signified something to me and other Black girls around the world. And this was at a time where artists like Trey Songz and Chris Brown were really big. So all the girls in my school had a crush on the biracial Canadian. So they were obviously watching the music video. And a lot of them had the same exact feeling that I had about Nicki. There was this girl in my class who was slowly but surely becoming a huge fan of Nicki Minaj. And she couldn't stop raving about her verse on Bedrock. That was one of the first times I started dealing with the parasocial aspects of Nicki Minaj.
Barbz, I know you're out there. I love you so much.
Following the footsteps of the Beehive as well as the Little Monsters and the Belieber, Nicki started working on curating an extremely parasocial fan base. Nicki understood something that the industry has now learned in the later parts of her career, which is that in order for her to be successful as a female rapper and in order for her to be successful in the earlier parts of her career, she needed a large fan base that wouldn't only buy on her behalf, but to basically act as free PR and a defense team when necessary. This is our formal introduction to the Barbz. Let's go ahead and talk about Nicki Minaj, the Barbz, and the parasocial connection that she is now exchanging for political expediency. Nicki, in the early parts of her career, would sit on MySpace for hours and on live streams talking to this small but growing fan base that she would later call the Barbz.
He started establishing the Barbz around the earlier parts of her career in her MySpace era. And as time went on, the Barbz themselves and Nicki started creating this name, the Barbz, in regards to Nicki's overall Barbie aesthetic. And what you saw in that moment is that a lot of these Barbz weren't as parasocial as some of them currently are. They instead were just, intrigued by this female rapper that was coming out of New York. And they were slowly but surely getting more enveloped into this idea of what Nicki Minaj could potentially be. And you started seeing the groundwork being laid for the parasocial behemoth that we now know as the Barbz.
Nicki's Barbz are basically diversity, equity, and inclusion personified. The fan base is primarily made up of young Black women and young queer men. I think it's because Nicki herself, one, identified as queer.
The pony represents your favorite rapper's face. Because that's my AKA, sit on your favorite rapper face. And sit on your favorite female rapper face, because I don't discriminate.
And two, because Nicki was so extravagant, almost in a drag-esque manner, that it automatically made her a fan of that same group. I know now she's being transphobic and pushing a bunch of fucking fugazi-ass anti-trans bullshit, but in the early parts of Nicki's career, she was accepting to the queer community. And this is what made her stand out, especially in a genre that, if we're being honest, wasn't that accepting. And at some point, if you were in hip-hop or in R&B, Nicki was the default female rapper to go to if you needed a verse. Whether she was on songs with artists like Keisha Cole, Usher, Nicki was the default female rapper to call. This all led to one of the most career-defining moments of Nicki's career. On October 23rd, 2010, Kanye West dropped his long-awaited project, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. The song Monster featured not only Kanye West, but Rick Ross, Jay-Z, and a new and upcoming female rapper named Nicki Minaj. The song wasn't only a great encapsulation of the 2010s, it wasn't only a part of one of the most important projects in hip-hop history, it was also Nicki's official introduction to not only hip-hop, but to the world. I don't want to rap the verse, but you probably know how it goes. Something about some bad bitch in Sri Lanka and Nicki wearing Giuseppe heels. This moment was extremely impactful. I didn't really get to experience the full onslaught of Pink Friday because one, I was very young, but two, I was poor. But I remember how important it felt at that moment in hip hop history.
Whoa! My album is on Amazon.com, Amazon.com. Ha 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 ha.
The success of Pink Friday was dynamic. And Nicki, well, she superseded expectations, selling 375,000 copies first week alone. And please keep in mind, this was during the time where niggas had to actually buy albums, like you actually had to buy a physical album in order for it to qualify as a sale. So her selling 375,000 copies with a majority, if not all of them, being pure sales should help you better understand how dynamic the project was. For anybody in hip hop who was second guessing or who may have been apprehensive to the idea of Nicki becoming the new queen of female rap, well, Nicki had a strong case for it.
Anything you want to hear?
Okay, I want to hear Nicki Minaj Superbass. Great.
Okay, well, introduce it. It's your radio station.
Very cool. Well, this is a song that is an album cut off of Nicki Minaj's album, and I've been listening to it on repeat, and I really freak my friends out because I can recite every single lyric to the rap. So
alongside songs like Monster, Superbass was also a defining moment for Nicki's career. A few weeks or so after the release of Pink Friday, Roman Reloaded, the song Superbass took off.
With the success of Superbass, Nicki was now being platformed in these different spaces. She went from being primarily in hip hop to now sitting across like these Good Morning America shows or like daytime TV shows where they were so obsessed with how she looked and how she talked and the way she dressed. It was very much like, looking back, it just shows how white pop media was so weird, right? Like they were picking apart the white girlies, but they were so weird when it came to the black pop girlies. The Ellen show itself was monumental. And this was before we found out that Ellen DeGeneres was committing war crimes towards her employees. So she was like at the top echelon. She was up there with Oprah. And Nicki being invited on that show meant that now white audiences, like the white liberal wine moms that watch Ellen's show, they were now being introduced to this very eclectic, theatrical, quirky, neurodivergent coded black woman from New York. So Nicki was no longer just a fave of the young black girls and the young queer kids that fell in love with her eclectic style. She was also now a fave of the white queer community as well as the white pop girlies.
This moment, alongside Taylor Swift's extremely viral Superbass clip, made the song a pop culture moment. After the success of Pink Friday, Nicki was everywhere. You couldn't escape her, whether it was on hip hop radio or the Billboard Hot 100, magazines, social media platforms, blogs. Nicki was everywhere.
While Nicki was dominating the charts and performing alongside Madonna at the Super Bowl, the industry and pop media outlets started to slowly but surely pick her apart. At this moment, Nicki's body, as well as her potentially selling out hip-hop, was the topic of conversation.
Some outlets and music critics really didn't know what to make of the project. It was more pop than its original counterpart. It sounded, into some hip-hop critics, like a play off of pop music that you would hear from artists like Katy Perry. Outside of MetLife Stadium stood one of hip-hop's most premier radio personalities and DJs, a radio personality at one of New York's most premier radio stations. Peter Rosenberg stood outside of MetLife Stadium, looking out in the crowd, and decided to make a statement.
Now hold on, before I get to the real hip-hop shit of the day, because I see the real hip-hop heads sprinkled in here, I see them. I know there's some chicks here waiting to sing Starships later. I'm not talking to y'all right now. Fuck that bullshit. Bullshit. I'm here to talk about real hip-hop shit.
The funny thing about this, Nicki was set to headline that year's Summer Jam. She was actually set to go on stage. There was a lot of backlash. One, Peter Rosenberg is some white dude trying to determine what constitutes as real hip-hop. Two, this showcases how hip-hop is extremely dismissive of music that is geared towards women. He made sure to separate what Nicki was doing and Nicki's fan base from what constituted as real hip-hop, basically showcasing this very dismissive attitude that real hip-hop heads have had towards women within the industry, but also, by extension, the fans that support these women.
I get it, like, that's what you do. I guess, to me, I just don't know your resume. You know what I'm saying? So I never found you funny. I never found you entertaining. I never found you smart. I just found you annoying.
Hip hop has always had this really weird, complex relationship with hyper commercialization and capitalism. Like, on one hand, the genre benefits from hyper commercialization, right? But on the other hand, hip hop is directly harmed by hyper commercialization because it directly contradicts what hip hop was initially created to be: a voice for the voiceless, specifically marginalized people, specifically Black people. And in a way, both Drake and Nicki have been the human avatars, like the human embodiments of this conversation and this dichotomy within hip hop. On one hand, both Drake and Nicki have been extremely successful and have brought and so many eyes to hip hop. But on the other hand, individuals, people who believe that they're practicing real hip hop, don't like both Nicki and Drake. In regards to our video, we're specifically going to focus on Nicki.
And it pays homage to Kim, obviously. You know what I'm saying? She did it great. She did a great job. But I'm here.
While Nicki was gaining ground in hip hop, a hip hop heavyweight was coming to reclaim her crown.
She came into our dressing room. She went and used the bathroom and stuff. And I stopped her. I was like, I want to make sure everything is cool with us because I'm a fan first. Is everything good? Yeah, everything good. We good.
Depending on which women you ask, whether you're talking to Lil Kim or Nicki, the beef between both of them can all be dwindled down to hip-hop's infamous one queen at a time rule. A rule that has plagued female rappers all throughout their careers. After Kim got out of prison, she was automatically pitted up against Nicki Minaj. Whenever Kim was interviewed, she would be asked about Nicki. And whenever Nicki was interviewed, she would be asked about Kim. And both of these women didn't hold back. Kim wasn't a fan of Nicki. She believed that the industry was trying to place Nicki above her, therefore trying to kick her out to make room for the new girl.
She was always throwing shots. I don't know what you're talking about.
I never heard it.
You need, because you're not trying.
I used to hear her pay homage, like she said. She used to say, "I love Kim. I love Foxy."
You're not trying to do your homework. That's why. Boo-boo, you gotta do your homework. Fendi would even say it, yeah, because, she was just a real cocky type of girl, whatever. She always wanted to be like you. She always wanted to be, and she would say, I'm gonna take her spot. They're not like her. She wanted to be the only female out there. So when Baby and them said, we're not fucking with this chick because you can't stand next to her, she loved it.
According to Nicki, Kim was just not accepting of the fact that the genre that she left behind due to her 2001 conviction was expanding, something that we will later see reflected in Nicki's demeanor towards newer female rappers.
Because I respect you, I love you, I've said it in every interview, time and time again. And if that's not good enough with you, mama, then it's something deep-rooted in you. You need to get something is bothering you inside. That's your insecurity bothering you. It's not Nicki Minaj. It would have been any girl that started popping. She picked a fight with Foxy. Then she picked a fight with Eve. Then she picked a fight with Remy. Now it's, then it was Miss Wallace. Then it was Nicki Minaj.
When I was at the Grammys last year, it was like I didn't even exist. And then to now be performing and to be nominated, it's a big deal. I'm not gonna be nervous about winning because I really don't think I'm gonna win anything. The way I look at it is, I know eventually in my career I'm gonna have Grammys.
Nicki was invited to perform at the Grammys, which gave the illusion of her potentially becoming an industry darling. But the Grammys used Whitney's death almost as a vehicle to tell Nicki, hey, you can't perform this. It seems on the surface that they were doing it because they wanted to protect Whitney, but in reality, they just didn't want any backlash from the Catholic Church because Nicki was using certain elements of Catholicism within her performance. And because Nicki herself was always very abrasive to the networking aspects of the industry, she told the Grammys to basically fuck off.
Now let's talk Grammys for a minute. The performance stirred up a little controversy. I know people from the Roman Catholic Church were upset and whatever. What would you say to them?
I've been doing theater my whole life. I've been doing theater. So I'm confused because
she advocated for her right to perform. She advocated for her free speech. She didn't really care about the industry politics that would lie ahead. And that decision that Nicki made that night put her in juxtaposition to the industry and the industry politics that are necessary to be dominant.
Due to the negative pushback that Nicki received with Pink Friday, Roman Reloaded, she decided that her next project, the Pinkprint, was going to be primarily focused on getting back to her hip-hop roots, named after Jay-Z's iconic The Blueprint Project. In this era, Nicki's colorful wigs were now replaced, as well as a more clean-cut style. During this time, Nicki was also dating a up-and-coming rapper from the city of Philadelphia, Meek Mill. Yes, that Meek Mill. Top of the world with the release of her Pinkprint era and working alongside artists like Beyonce and Rihanna. In reality, it seems as though Nicki was dealing with an extremely insecure man behind the scenes. According to allegations from Nicki Minaj, Meek Mill was not only emotionally abusive, but physically abusive as well. She would cite incidents where Meek Mill was not only abusive to her, but was also abusive to the women in his life.
My mother would let my father be violent with her. And she always brings up the story as a little girl. I would stand in front of my mother and go like this. And I vowed, like, that's why I'm, like, maybe some people would describe me as abrasive or bitchy or whatever, because I vowed from that age, no man would ever abuse me, call me out my name, treat me like that. And then all of a sudden, that was my life.
And because Meek Mill, who was most likely aware of Drake's infatuation with Nicki, and it seems as though that Nicki may have potentially said something to a very insecure Meek Mill, and that basically acted as a domino effect that led to the beef between Meek Mill and Drake.
As Nicki started ascending more into pop culture, her body became more of a conversation. When she sat down with Joe Budden, right, the Oprah of hip hop himself, and she was talking about her body, she mentioned that one of the reasons why she got her body enhanced was in due part due to hip hop, due to the aesthetics that she was always around, due to the influence that she got from some of the mentors and the men that she looked up to within the industry. But that body was now being something that was picked apart by these white media outlets. It was a reoccurring theme at some point to make fun of Nicki's body. And at that moment, what you saw her do was what a lot of women who had body enhancements during that time do. Try to pivot or claim that it was real. But Nicki, alongside Lil Kim and Kim Kardashian, and even Miss Amber MAGA Rose herself, they were a few of the women that we saw with obvious body enhancements. And Nicki's body enhancements has obviously led into the influx of what we now see within female rap, where a BBL is like a necessity. It's a requirement in order to be a top female rapper. Every one of the girls have gotten something done here and there. And what you saw initially with Nicki, where she was very apprehensive about, her potential plastic surgery, is something that we no longer see in female rap. There is obviously still pushback. Female rappers' bodies, like a la Cardi B, are always going to be picked apart. This is sadly something that comes with the industry, and sadly something that comes with the burdensome of the industry. But we notice that the stigma is not as obscene as it was in the early parts of Nicki's career.
The industry at some point got extremely exhausted with Nicki. Even though she was extremely successful and she brought a lot of eyes to female rap, Nicki didn't really have competition per se. At some point, Nicki Minaj had a monopolistic hold on the industry. If you have monopolies, that means that the genre or the industry is not going to expand. It's not going to grow. In order for the genre to succeed, and there does need to be competition.
The 2017 MTV VMAs are back with 2 minutes.
Let's talk about Miss Conceited herself, Remy Ma.
I feel like the industry, they make it seem like it's 1,000 dudes out here. 962 of them is dead whack. But there's 1,000 dudes out here. But when it comes to the females, they make it seem like it only could be one.
The battle between Nicki and Remy follows a pattern that was well established with the battle between Nicki and Kim. According to Remy, while in jail, Nicki was supportive.
Shout out to Remy. Free Remy. Word. You know what? Free Remy. Fuck you. Free Remy.
After Remy was released from jail, she was interviewed by The Breakfast Club, where Charlamagne the God and the other co-hosts asked her about whether or not there was beef between her and Nicki Minaj. Well, Remy claimed that there wasn't actually any beef and that she and Nicki actually had a cordial relationship, so there was no need for her to diss Nicki at any point. But after her interview with The Breakfast Club, a couple of days later, Remy dropped Shether. Shether was diabolical. It was diabolical for many elements. One of the main elements, well, Remy didn't hold back. She went through and dissected every single part of Nicki Minaj's career. On the cover, ripped apart Barbie figure. A pink background to represent Nicki's iconic Pink Friday album, played directly off of Nas's iconic Ether diss track. A direct shot towards Nicki. That Nas Ether play, yeah, that I would argue that was double homicide. One, because the Ether beat, but two, because you're dating that nigga. And technically, he had to sign off on it. So, double homicide. Remy posted on social media, "Do you want to see a dead body?" Shether stopped the internet. I don't know if we saw a dead body per se, but we did see a broken and tattered Barbie. Remy went through breaking down Nicki's alleged plastic surgery, the fact that she may or may not be writing her own raps, something that was integral and important to Nicki. Remy also went ahead and dissected Nicki's weird-ass brother and his nasty-ass allegations towards him. This, alongside a plethora of allegations about Nicki potentially getting with this artist or getting with that artist, made Shether an automatic blow towards the idea of who Nicki Minaj was. The internet as well as hip-hop media lost their mind. Everybody was shocked. She helped break down the edifice that was the queen of rap. And in response to Remy Shether, Nicki released No Frauds. And I want y'all to just understand that No Frauds is not a terrible song. It's not terrible. No. It's not terrible. It's just, why? That wasn't the response that was necessary at that time. In the song, she's literally talking about laughing at Remy from like a very pretentious elitist point of view, which again fed into the narrative that Nicki was an out-of-touch queen. And that fit perfectly into the narrative that Miss Conceited herself was painting. This, if you ask me, is the beginning of the infamous Nicki hate train. At that year's Summer Jam stood Remy Ma on stage alongside legends like Queen Latifah, MC Lyte, and the Lil Kim herself. An obvious shot to Nicki. And up on the Summer Jam screen itself laid a picture of Nicki Minaj's obituary. An obvious shot at the career and the legacy of Nicki Minaj. And on that stage with Remy Ma was an up-and-coming female rapper named Cardi B. Cardi's entrance into female rap was dynamic. Like the City Girls, Cardi came into the genre with a different and dynamic view of what female rap should be. Both Cardi and the City Girls weren't really lyrical. They instead were trying to utilize female rap as a vehicle to get to the life that they wanted. Because of that different view and approach to female rap, it automatically made Cardi stand out. Cardi, alongside the City Girls, helped keep that door open that Nicki initially kicked in. Because Cardi was on that stage, it signified to hip-hop that she was automatically going to be anti-Nicki. Right around this time, Nicki released her song, No Flags, alongside Atlanta rapper 21 Savage. In Nicki's verse, she points out how labels within hip-hop and labels within the industry overall are currently in the process of trying to create another her. This was automatically seen as a diss towards Cardi B. Cardi had recently signed over to Atlantic, a label that had historically had problems with Nicki specifically because the label was, in its own way, trying to break Nicki's monopolistic hold on the industry.
So then you are now getting a lot of attention, particularly from America, but I read once that you turned down a US record deal with Atlantic Records. So tell us about that. What happened?
Well, basically they saw my Look At Me Now video that was on Worldstar. So next thing you know, I flew out there, and the thing that he said to me was, "We will sign you, yeah. We got this much money to sign you with, but we want you to do a diss track for Nicki Minaj." I was like, oh, no. So I said no. I told him all the reasons why. And he was like, "No, but you going to be hot off this." I was like, "Nah, I don't want to do it." And he kept like writing down higher digits for me to sign. Really? I looked at the digits. They looked very appealing to me at that time. But my heart, I've always got to go with my heart, man. And I had a funny feeling about it. I thought, no, man, I'm not.
So because of Cardi's proximity to artists like Remy and Lil Kim, as well as Nicki's diss on No Flags, people automatically believed that both of the women were beefing. However, Nicki came out a few days later clarifying that her verse on No Flags actually had nothing to do with Cardi. This clarification helped ease rumors for like a few days. After this, Cardi B was featured on G-Eazy and A$AP Rocky's No Limit. In the song, Cardi highlights how there are people throwing subs at her. This was automatically seen as a direct shot towards Nicki. Cardi, who later interviewed with The Breakfast Club, tried her best to clarify that this wasn't directed towards Nicki, that it was directed towards a bunch of the women back in her hood.
The record, you say, can you stop with all the subs? Bitch, I ain't Jared. Who was that directed toward?
Oh, well, you know what I'm saying? This is the thing that people, because, you know, people don't understand, though, that I got like beef with 10 bitches still in the hood, and I still be in the hood.
Something that was pretty understandable if you knew anything about Cardi B, her persona online, and her stint on Love and Hip Hop. This all culminated to the moment Cardi B went #1 with the iconic Bodak Yellow. And the song was everywhere, with the assistance of local radio stations in New York, as well as her extremely personable and approachable personality. Cardi was able to take a song that was a riff of Kodak Black's No Flocking to become a star within hip-hop.
The success of Bodak Yellow later led to Cardi B winning Best Rap Album at that year's Grammy for Invasion of Privacy, something that was seen as a direct shot towards Nicki because she had obviously become blackballed by the Grammy specifically. This, alongside Cardi winning multiple awards, made it seem as though that Nicki was no longer at the top of the food chain within female rap.
When Bodak Yellow went #1, Nicki Minaj posted on her favorite health site, Twitter, "I can't do it in a New York accent because that would be like offensive."
When Bodak Yellow went #1, Nicki Minaj tweeted out in support of her fellow New Yorker. And when Cardi saw this, she was ecstatic, therefore showcasing how both women at the beginning of this were apprehensive towards the idea of beef.
If you don't know by now, hip-hop isn't really predicated primarily off of the bars, off of the music. It's also based on the narratives, the story that is being told. And according to hip-hop media, you had this personable, approachable, up-and-comer versus the standoffish queen of hip-hop. But if you're somebody that watches me, you're probably aware of what I'm going to say next. If the industry wants you to beef, you're going to fucking beef. And both of those women, well, at some point, they took the bait. Motorsport, initially, when it was introduced, was supposed to be like this big moment, right? It was supposed to be a big moment because you had the reigning queen of rap getting on a song with this new up-and-comer. Like, this was supposed to basically be like the moment where both worlds collided. Mind you, the Migos were extremely hot at this moment, but niggas didn't even care what Takeoff, Offset, or Quavo were saying on the song. We were all tuned in for Nicki and Cardi. It seemed as though at some point the main conversation between Nicki and Cardi had a lot to do with whether or not Nicki changed her verse once Cardi got on the song. Cardi was asked by the press whether or not Nicki changed her verse and how she felt about it.
When I heard the track,
Right.
her verse was in Finnish. Or it's not the verse that is on right now.
And because Cardi probably at that time was already exhausted with constantly having to answer questions about Nicki, she was a little dismissive, but nothing crazy. Well, nothing crazy to me.
The first interview she did after Motorsport came out, it just really hurt me because she looked so aggravated and angry, and the only thing she kept saying was, "Oh, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that verse. I didn't hear that verse. She changed her verse." Like, I was like, what?
According to Nicki Minaj, in her interview later that she did with Zane Lowe, she wished that the individuals that were on set or the people that she worked with would have at least tried to advocate on her behalf. And she felt as though that the Migos and Cardi specifically weren't doing enough.
At the time, I went on Twitter and I explained how Motorsport came about. And, people were saying that I was lying. So I texted Quavo and I said, hey, just, could you back me up on this? Because, I don't want people to think I'm lying. What do I have to lie about? And he didn't back me up. And, he texted me. He was like, I would go on Twitter and back you up if you were my girl. LOL. And that hurt. Because it hurt my feelings to know that people would watch me be slaughtered. And not one person will step in to say the truth. They will run with that lie because it's can I have some water, please? They'll allow people to run with the lie because it's entertaining to make Nicki seem like a bad guy.
Cardi was also interviewed by Ebro, And in the interview, she talked about how most of the drama that she was seeing online was being done on behalf of the fans as well as hip hop media. This, alongside what just happened with Shether and how Nicki reacted with that, as well as the Lil Kim versus Nicki situation that happened earlier in her career, made it seem as though that Nicki was just somebody that was apprehensive to competition and was willing to do whatever necessary behind the scenes to kneecap other female rappers. So her getting on Queen Radio and talking about how the industry was trying to push her out, well, to a lot of people, that sounded like a fucking sob story. After multiple months of backlash, Nicki finally came out with Chun-Li. Nicki adopted the personality and alter ego of Chun-Li, which was in itself supposed to be emblematic of Nicki's full-on acceptance of the new media framing around her. The alter ego of Chun-Li was the perfect embodiment of the radicalization of Nicki Minaj. Chun-Li was Nicki's initial warning shot to the industry. The edifice and artifice that was created by hip-hop media was now going to be fully adapted by the woman herself. This all culminated to the Met Gala event. In 2018, both Nicki Minaj and Cardi B were invited to that year's Met Gala. Cardi B took off her shoe and threw it across the room, aiming for Nicki Minaj. At the end of this huge scuffle, Nicki Minaj stayed in the building and Cardi B was escorted out with a huge knot on her forehead.
This woman is at the best stage in her career, and she's out here throwing bottles and throwing shoes? You put your hands on certain people, you gonna die. Period.
How you say that I was the wild animal, that I attacked you, that you was mortified, that you was humiliated, playing the victim, but now you're the gangster? You need to pick a side. Do you want to be the victim or do you want to be the gangster? And since you want to bring that motorsport shit up again, I'm glad you brung it up because I've been dying to talk about it for a hot minute. First of all, you changed your verse 2 or 3 times, and the day before we were supposed to do the motorsport video, you turned in your last verse of it. And I was not feeling of you talking about, oh, if Cardi the QB, I'm Nick Lombardi, following it up with, bitch, you my son, go sit on a potty. Bitch, you not my coach, because you never helped me to get in the career.
Do want to emphasize this. Yes, the media is responsible for laying the groundwork in regards to the battle between Nicki and Cardi. But at some point, both of these women started doing more than the media could even dream of. As recently as a couple of months ago, you had both Nicki Minaj and Cardi B on the internet attacking each other's kids, something that both of them said they would never do. Cardi B, somebody who is supposed to have better politics than Nicki Minaj, was on the internet picking on a child and trying to make fun of him being potentially neurodivergent. Nicki Minaj, somebody who has always harped on the fact that Cardi B is a non-black woman, was being colorist to a child. A child. As expected, there was obvious backlash. Nicki, after this moment, released some long Twitter statement about how this is supposed to be some 10D, 50D chess move as a way to justify how she was basically exhibiting the same exact traits that she swore she would never participate in. Post this moment, both of these women have become extremely negatively polarizing within the genre of female rap. If you're somebody that is a fan of Cardi B, you're most likely not a fan of Nicki Minaj. And if you're somebody that's a fan of Nicki Minaj, you're most likely not a fan of Cardi B. And in this moment, Cardi and Nicki act as avatars of the negative polarization that has taken over American politics. Historically, the Democrats have had this monopolistic hold on pop culture and how pop culture can be used as a way to engage low information voters, which basically means niggas that have lives. But they did lose all of that in 2024. The Democratic Party has basically started using Nicki Minaj as easy engagement bait. So yeah, that's why. That's why the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are both talking about Nicki and Cardi.
There are some naysayers who say, why did you marry this guy, Kenneth Petty? And I don't know what he does for a living. I just know that he did time in jail for, he's a sex offender. Well, she's no stranger to that because her is in jail for
sex offending.
Alongside the backlash that Nicki was receiving in regards to Cardi B as well as hip-hop media was also backlash in regards to her affiliation with not only her brother, but the man she would later marry, Kenneth Petty. Nicki's relationship with the predatory men in her life has always been a very glaring spot within her legacy. At age 15, Nicki Minaj's husband, Kenneth Petty, was arrested for alleged essay against a 16-year-old victim named Jennifer Hill. After some investigation was done, Kenneth Petty confessed to the crime.
Jennifer, what happened after he grabbed you?
I felt something in my back. So I just assumed there was a gun. And I started walking. And I'm pleading with him the whole way. I'm trying to understand what does he want. And we get in front of this house. It might have been maybe the second or third house from the corner. And he kind of reaches behind me with his foot to push the door open. I'm asking him, like, what do you want? Like, if you just want me to chill here with you, I will. And then he said I knew what he wanted.
And because of that conviction, Kenneth Petty is now listed as a registered SO. This was the official first plane to hit the Nicki Minaj World Trade Centers. This was post Meek Mill as well, and Nicki had already had an extremely tumultuous relationship with Meek Mill. Nicki alleged that there were incidents where Meek Mill was not only emotionally abusive, but was physically abusive. Sadly, there wasn't that much remorse given to Nicki, the muse of a large portion of hip-hop. The woman who not only pushed back against misogyny within the industry, but was willing to take down anybody that talked bad about her. That was the woman that was now affiliating with Kenneth Petty. I'm gonna be very honest. I feel very uncomfortable talking about people's marriages or their relationships or their kids. Like, I don't like talking about that. I would rather focus on how somebody is pushing propaganda on behalf of a system. But in this moment, it itself ties into Nicki's larger view and potential affiliation with MAGA. So we must discuss her husband.
Jennifer, let's move forward. When it was announced that Kenneth Petty was marrying Nicki Minaj, what was your first thought about that news?
I was so afraid of being found out. I was so afraid of being known as the person he violated. And I didn't want that. You know, it's Nicki Minaj. You know, I didn't want that to reflect on my children.
One of the reasons as to why people soured on Nicki at this moment wasn't only because she was potentially going to get married to this person. It's also because the victim came out and said that Nicki Minaj was allegedly in service of her husband, Kenneth Petty.
Nicki addressed fans who brought up Kenneth's attempted rape conviction by replying to them on social media, saying he was 15, she was 16, in a relationship. What are your thoughts about that?
It was like reliving it again, because it was a lie. It wasn't true. We both were 16. We were never in a relationship. I just felt woman to woman. I was wrong of her.
The fact that Nicki has always been, I don't know if it's male-centered or male-aligned, but a bird, right? Nicki has very much bird attributes, has always put her in a place where she sometimes justifies the disgusting, heinous actions of the men around her. And a lot of Barbz who, you know, historically were willing to defend any of Nicki's actions at this moment, they were now put in a very tricky predicament because some of them didn't align with her choices, didn't accept her choices in regards to the man that she was marrying. God forbid you were apprehensive to the decisions that Nicki was making in regards to the men she was associating with. And instead of Nicki, who has always had a strong parasocial connection with her fans and listening to their genuine concerns, you started seeing she was even becoming more dismissive towards her fans in support of this specific man. Over the last couple of weeks, I've seen a lot of people make really good arguments in regards to how Nicki may potentially be aligning with fascism as a way to protect not only her brother, but to protect the man she has married, Kenneth Petty. And I honestly think that itself plays into why Nicki is now aligning with MAGA and MAGAism. The Republican Party is literally known for the Epstein class, as you've probably noticed throughout the whole Epstein class of it all. It's a party that has a worldview where women aren't victims, men are victims. And as you've noticed with Nicki, as time has gone on, in specific regards to her husband, she started adopting this idea that her husband is actually the victim. It's not the actual victim at the case that is the victim. It's the backlash to her husband that is the problem. And that mindset specifically, that mindset itself, that is like a mindset that aligns perfectly with MAGA's view of the world, where the only real victims are specifically white men, but men by extension. Nicki's view of predators, as well as the Republican Party's view of predators, seem to align pretty well. And what you started seeing at this moment was that Nicki was slowly but surely becoming more isolated and more otherized and ostracized from the industry.
Nicki went from being on all of these fashion magazines and being at all of these fashion events to now being a person that was more isolated from the industry. And mind you, this is a woman that you would see on commercials, you would see on billboards, you would see on different, TV shows. You would see Nicki everywhere. She was always talked about and she was always covered. And again, it's like, even though Nicki herself was always anti-industry in a way, she was always very much of a recluse, it just got even more extreme. And as time has gone on, we've started seeing less fashion shows. We started seeing less events and more station heads, more Twitter rants, more, IG lives. Those were how she was now communicating with her fans. That's how she was just reestablishing and re-cementing that parasocial relationship, and less so these large-scale events that she was initially a premier figure at. In the early parts of Nicki's career, she was religious to an extent, but at this moment, with the entire world crashing on her, she slowly but surely became even more religious, and the way that she would sometimes express it seemed very God would punish you, where she would utilize religion in a more revenge mindset, in a retaliatory mind. In a way, I call it the WhatsAppification, but it's more so the fact that Nicki's view of religion was now being used as in a more extreme manner to try to protect her.
Let me say this, it'll never fucking happen. You can go all there, everything y'all want to, every witch doctor in the motherfucking world, it'll never fucking happen. Praise be to God. I am who I am because I am who I am. When you say things like, oh, well, we're past it. Yes, I'm past it. Praise be to God. But
you don't think everyone else is?
But no, not that. What I'm saying is, I still had to go through these things.
Now, I understand when I say the term radicalization, a lot of people probably go like, radicalization, that's a big word.
And also, we do have to take into account the fact that Nicki Minaj is not some 13-year-old white kid from Oklahoma. And also, she's not a billionaire who became radicalized because he wasn't invited to a EV summit. So a lot of people may be apprehensive to this type of framing. We first need to break down exactly what is the term radicalize. What exactly is radicalization, especially in regards to political radicalization that we may be seeing with Miss Onika Tanya herself? The term radicalization means going from a person who has more mainstream view of politics or who may express more mainstream politics like we saw Nicki did in 2018.
There are multitudes of reasons as to why individuals may become quote-unquote radicalized or quote-unquote magnified in their politics. One of the main reasons as to why individuals may become radicalized can be directly tied to this idea of personal grievance. The second reason some individuals may become radicalized or magnified in their politics can be directly tied to isolation. And this is something that Nicki Minaj herself has openly talked about. Another thing that is exhibited by Nicki is polarization. And this is something I would argue that you see with Nicki Minaj.
One of the main frameworks of radicalization is this idea of a cognitive opening, where something happens so drastically in your life that makes you susceptible to this different worldview. And I would say in the case of Nicki Minaj, that would act as her 2016 to 2019 hate train era. This period of time in Nicki's life is drastically changed by the rise of Cardi B. For somebody like Nicki, who went from the default choice to being now listed as an option, that would have probably damaged her worldview. And then also because Nicki does lean a lot into the meritocracy argument, right? Where her entire thesis of the case is, I may be a bitch, you may not like me, but at least you know that I am the number one at this shit. I will give you the numbers. I will give you the stats. And now kind of shakes that foundation, shakes that thesis of the case.
Because of people like you who made a sport out of tearing down a young black woman who's done nothing but come in this game with an authentic come up, writing raps, and doing what the fuck was really actually necessary. No Instagram, no reality shows, no sucking DJs' dicks. I was on Twitter building my fan base, getting a rapport with my fans, booking shows myself, okay? I didn't have all of that shit. I couldn't pay a bunch of people to say they liked me and do all of this shit.
And that itself puts her in an unpredictable spot. She becomes a female rapper for the first time in her career, not the female rapper. Nicki is bred, under the idea of a blog era rapper. So she has very much the same traditional hip hop beliefs as you may see in somebody like J. Cole and Kendrick. Somebody who is very much focused on writing his own raps. He wants to get better. He wants the meritocracy argument. Similar to Kendrick. Kendrick, who's somebody who wants to be always at the top. Kendrick is extremely hyper competitive, similar to Nicki. And because Nicki hadn't had competition for an extended period of time in her career, now having competition, and even if she herself did not feel as though the competition might have met her standards of what was a competitor, Cardi was still a competitor. Cardi understood the attention economy. Cardi understood the networking aspects of hip hop. And what you saw in this moment, because Cardi was now ascending, she was being pushed off of what Meatball would call her pivot, right? Like she was getting pushed off her pivot. She was lashing out. She started lashing out in certain regards where she would go on Queen Radio, which is supposed to be a show about her, her Queen project and celebrating her legacy, but it instead turns into a radio show that she's constantly trying to clean up narratives that she feels as though are unfair. And even in some cases, in regards to Mr. Kenneth, she starts using Queen Radio as a way to lambast the media, her fans, and even the victim herself. And what you started noticing with Nicki is that genuine criticisms about her husband and his allegations and the apprehensiveness that her fan base, the Barbz, had, was being dismissed because it was all now being couched under this umbrella of hate train. And it didn't matter what was legitimate criticism or what was just parasocial hate.
Post Cardi B, every single female rapper that has been introduced into the industry is now seen as a direct competitor of Nicki, because as we've established, hip hop is extremely hyper fixated on the one queen at a time rule. Every single new female rapper that comes into the industry is automatically pitted up against Nicki. And because Nicki herself has not really let go of this idea either, she directly buys into it. Even though she is extremely knowledgeable about the politics of hip hop, she continuously falls into the pit of the one queen at a time rule. At some point, I would argue that Nicki genuinely started believing in the limited ideas of what could constitute female rap. At some point, Nicki Minaj became not only a victim to the system, but became a tool of the system, basically reiterating some of the negative aspects of the industry that she existed in. Nicki is somebody that genuinely has a hierarchical view of the industry and is somebody that genuinely believes in the idea of meritocracy. This is something you saw in regards to her battle with Cardi B. This idea that Cardi wasn't a real hip hop artist because Cardi B, insert promiscuous, scandalous rumor here. And what I get from that is how Nicki is somebody that genuinely believes that she has not benefited from desirability politics. Now, obviously, look at Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj is an extremely gorgeous woman. And even in this moment where she's aligning with fascism, outside of the Erika Kirk makeup, is still extremely gorgeous, right? She is literally a first generation Blasian. She's up there with Jhené Aiko and Karrueche. And the way that she kind of talks about other female rappers makes it seem as though that they only have desirability politics to rely on. Now, keep in mind, Nicki Minaj is the same individual that made Anaconda. Without Nicki's Anaconda, there's no WAP. But instead of Nicki looking at that as like a monumental move forward, she instead sees it as those girls are less than me. Like, one of the things that I've noticed specifically with Nicki over the last couple of years is how Nicki responds to criticism. Like, in the early parts of her career, she was always apprehensive to criticism, but I think that's something that you just expect with any mainstream artist, any large-scale artist. But with Nicki, post her hate train era, she's become extremely abrasive and extremely combative in regards to any criticism. Whether small forms of critique or somebody potentially not aligning with her is automatically seen as you are working on behalf of the people that are trying to take me down. Everything is on behalf of the people trying to take her down. On one hand, it shields her directly from criticism, but on the other hand, it just kind of shows how over time, Nicki has gotten into this really weird space where any type of critique towards her, whether valid or not, is automatically seen as a part of this larger overall plan to take her down. Everything is conspiratorial. There's not a thing that can happen on social media that Nicki doesn't somehow find a way to directly associate with the past trauma that she's experienced. Like, if you see Nicki's activity on social media, specifically on her favorite app, Twitter, a lot of the conversations there, a lot of the discourse specifically coming from Nicki, all ties into this larger conspiratorial plan, either by Roc Nation or other forces to take her down. And I think a lot of that analysis, a lot of those thoughts and opinions from Nicki can be specifically tied back to what she experienced during her hate train era. Every single thing is seen as a part of that larger conspiratorial plan. That is one of the main reasons as to why I think over time Nicki's hate train era has been more impactful than even Nicki herself would like to admit. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm like really chilly. However, I still need to continue my video. Throughout my entire life, Nicki has been omnipresent. And I am somebody that has been a fan of Nicki. I am somebody that has respected the legacy of Nicki Minaj and the work and the effort she's putting in the industry. But none of that justifies the actions of Nicki.
And during the 2020 pandemic, when America was on lockdown and the president of the United States at that time, who happens to be the same president of the United States now, was telling us to drink bleach, Nicki Minaj decided to tweet out COVID misinformation. Now, I understand that in the midst of everything that was happening with the pandemic, a lot of us were genuinely scared and confused. But what Nicki was doing in this moment wasn't just having questions. She was actually pushing COVID misinformation and disinformation, especially at a time where a lot of us were genuinely afraid. And having an impressionable fan base like the Barbz was a recipe for disaster. So you had epidemiologists and scientists who they themselves most likely love Superbass as well. Epidemiologists from Trinidad, Dr. Fauci himself, academic papers, like niggas were writing dissertations, academic papers, scientific research papers in regards to the disinformation. And hopefully you see the groundwork I'm laying in regards to how at some point Nicki's view of the world, Nicki's framework of the world started slowly but surely drifting into this right-wing view of the world, where everything was viewed through the lens of grievance politics and everything was viewed through a very conspiratorial lens, similar to what we see in MAGA.
Bullet fragment, bitch. She a bullet fragment, bitch. Now listen here, ho. Get up on your good foot.
In the early parts of January, Megan Thee Stallion dropped what we now know as Hiss. Let's go ahead and examine what I consider the last great spectacle in female rap, the battle between the Queen and the Challenger. Hiss versus Bigfoot. If there was one award I could give Megan Thee Stallion, is Master Networker. Megan was on top of her game, understanding basically the way to get into the good graces of the somewhat, sometimes benevolent Queen. And Megan, well, she played her role. After this moment, both Megan and Nicki Minaj collabed on what we now know as Hot Girl Summer. The story between Megan Thee Stallion and Nicki Minaj basically goes. They collabed on Hot Girl Summer. Allegedly, Megan tried to get Nicki to drink when she was pregnant. Nicki didn't like this. Megan then collabed with Cardi B on the mega smash hit called WAP, which dropped during the pandemic and basically solidified Megan Thee Stallion's spot in female rap alongside Cardi B. Nicki would later come out and drop Red Ruby the Sleaze, which was a direct diss towards Megan. Post Megan's 2020 DV incident, she had sadly become a victim of the media. Hip-hop media would obsess over different aspects of the case, basically trying to build this counter-narrative to what the facts laid down, that Megan Thee Stallion was sadly a victim of Tory Lanez. But because Tory Lanez had connections within the industry and because hip-hop loves to jump for patriarchy, you had niggas on the internet basically trying to justify the harm that was done to Megan Thee Stallion. This, alongside some of hip-hop's heavyweights like Drake, as well as academics and other individuals co-signing the narratives that were coming out of the Tory camp. And with all of this as a backdrop, Megan Thee Stallion released Hiss. Now, I'm not going to really entertain the argument that this wasn't a diss. It's obviously a fucking diss. And with 2 lines, Megan was trying to push back against the narratives as well as the very sharp lyrics that Nicki dropped on Red Ruby the Sleaze. Now, I have a lot of critiques about the Red Ruby the Sleaze persona of Nicki Minaj, but I will say the song itself, damn, Nicki might be the most talented MAGA mouthpiece them niggas have, because Red Ruby the Sleaze was... And Hiss? Well, Hiss was good as fuck too. I am a fan of female rap, and I'm a fan of the female rap girlies that write. And Megan, well, she wrote her ass off on Hiss. A majority of the song was directed towards other individuals within the industry, but those 2 lines specifically open up the never-ending civil war between Megan Thee Stallion, Roc Nation, and Nicki Minaj. According to Nicki Minaj, this battle was an amalgamation of things. On one hand, this was primarily directed towards the niggas behind Megan Thee Stallion, which was basically Roc Nation, Desiree Perez, and Beyonce's husband, Jay-Z. According to Nicki Minaj, she had beef with Roc Nation, Jay-Z specifically, after signing a title contract. Nicki Minaj was at the height of her career. Jay-Z started Tidal. Nicki would later reveal that during this period of time, she allegedly had some issues with Jay-Z and Tidal. According to her, Jay-Z and Roc Nation would owe her money. And in an industry where Jay-Z is God, Nicki Minaj deciding to basically go towards Roc Nation, well, that was automatically seen as an industry no-no. This alongside Nicki's rightful anger about Lil Wayne not being able to perform at the 2024 Super Bowl because of alleged issues between him and Jay-Z. After this moment, Nicki Minaj would harp constantly on the alleged weird cases with individuals like Aaliyah, Foxy, and his current wife, Beyonce. Can I share my little conspiracy with you? Let me share my little conspiracy with you. I think the reason why Bigfoot was so bad is because Nicki spent majority of her time on the internet crashing out in regards to Megan in response to all of the industry strings she thought were being pulled. In this moment, she was so hyperfixated on, again, her grievance politics that she forgot to do the one thing that she has become so legendary for: rap. Nicki didn't give you something as iconic as Stupid Hoe, a diss track directed towards Lil Kim. Nicki didn't give you Looking Ass, a diss track directed towards Gucci Mane and the men of the industry who had talked down on her. She didn't even give you something like her iconic Monster verse. Damn it, she didn't even give you Falling For You. Instead, she gave you Bigfoot. One of the funniest things is that with Bigfoot, like when Trump got ooh in Pennsylvania, a lot of people were literally using Bigfoot lyrics as a way to make fun of him. So now, in the end, both women are obviously not innocent in everything. But what we saw in this moment was Nicki was willing to act on behalf of the system as a way to put a female rapper in her place, similar to what the industry had historically done to her. I am not asking Nicki to be a girl's girl. And I honestly think sometimes the girl's girl gimmick and marketing scheme can get very corny because, as we're seeing currently, the girls don't really like each other. But what you notice in this moment isn't that Nicki's not a girl's girl. She's an active obstacle in the lives of some of these female rappers on the behalf of the industry. Can I give y'all a little theory? A demi theory per se. One of the things that I think has been under discussed in regards to the battle between Nicki and Megan, as well as Nicki's negative polarization against the Democratic Party, is the 2024 Kamala Harris rally. What you see at this rally is two of Nicki's sops, both Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B, having prominent moments within the rally, Megan performing and Cardi speaking. But the Harris campaign didn't reach out to Nicki, most likely due to the fact that Nicki's politics at this point were already leaning rightward. And what you saw in this moment was because Megan Thee Stallion was at the Kamala Harris rally, Fox News started negatively covering her, which ties back into a belief system that we've seen exhibited with Nicki before, of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Something that we saw with Raw Ali. This, alongside Jay-Z's association with the Democratic Party, may be one of the under-discussed reasons as to why Nicki Minaj is now fully aligning with MAGA.
First of all, Nigeria is a place I've always loved. Someone very dear to me, my pastor, is Nigerian. I have lots of Nigerian Barbz. And so hearing that people are being kidnapped, and while they're in church, people are being kidnapped, people are being killed, brutalized, all because of their religion. And that should spark outrage in the great America.
I remember waking up that fateful day where Nicki Minaj posted that she was going to be aligning with Trump because of Christianity and because of Christian persecution. Nicki argued that the reason she was now aligning herself with Republican talking points in regards to the specific issue was because she cared so much about what was happening in Nigeria, posting on that hell site that is fuck-ass Twitter. One of the things that I keep mentioning in this video is how Nicki is a really big fan of Twitter. And I think as time has gone on with the full-on magaification of Twitter, Nicki, similar to a lot of the American populace, most likely had their algorithm pushing right-wing politics and right-wing propaganda. And one of the things that we've seen with Nicki is she now, similar to some of the things I've seen with some of my Afro-Caribbean aunties, is that she repeats right-wing extremist talking points all under the guise of trying to protect Christians.
All you have to do is look at what is happening in other places in the world. Look at what is being done to Christians all around the world. And ask yourself why people in this country that were in positions of power felt so comfortable.
Nicki was repeating the talking points of Christian nationalists like Charlie Kirk. A lot of these individuals that were pushing this idea that there was Christian persecution happening in Nigeria were most likely utilizing this as a way to potentially push further imperialism in a country that was filled with resources. And Nicki utilizing her platform at this moment, all under the guise of protecting Christians, most likely something that was used as a way to justify Donald Trump's further imperialism, showcased to a lot of people that Nicki was willing to align her cultural capital with MAGA extremism. After Nicki's post on social media, she was invited to the UN to speak alongside failed NSA advisor Matt Waltz. Do you understand how much of a loser Matt Waltz is? And this is a big moment, right? Like, she's speaking at the UN, even if it is in a random conference room on behalf of Matt Waltz. She argued that this was because she cared about the people of Nigeria, and she would do this in regards to any marginalized group. This had nothing to do with Christian nationalism and her fully becoming MAGA. People started pointing out how this seems more like a Trojan horse to justify the imperialist actions of Donald Trump and the Christian nationalist elements of MAGA and MAGAism. Donald Trump later went on to bomb Nigeria on December 25th, the day that most Christians view as the birth of Jesus Christ. Ain't that ironic?
And that's why we're here, demanding justice for Renee Good and letting them know that this will not stand. They cannot pretend to be a house of God while harboring someone who is directing ICE agents to wreak havoc upon our community and who killed Renee Good, who almost killed a 6-month-old baby. Enough is enough.
After the murders of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, Don Lemon, the former journalist from CNN, followed protesters into a Minnesota church to film their advocacy against the pastor in that church. The pastor who stood up on that helm preaching about the morals of Christianity. According to the activist, he was working alongside ICE. Don Lemon did what he does best, journalism. He interviewed the parishioners as well as the pastor himself and asked the parishioners what they thought about the protests that they were currently experiencing. After this moment, there was automatic backlash. And one of those individuals leading the backlash against Don Lemon was Nicki Minaj. Nicki argued that the reason why this was happening wasn't because Don Lemon was a journalist, but more so because Christianity is now allowed to be played with. Something that we've heard from Christian nationalists and Christian nationalist accommodators. Individuals who believe that Christianity itself is always solely persecuted in comparison to other religions. Even though Nicki argued that she was doing this on behalf of Christianity, I would argue that in reality, she may have been doing it on behalf of a different type of Christianity, Christian nationalism. At some point, Nicki started going full homophobic towards Don Lemon. She started using a very derogatory term that I'm not going to repeat. Nicki's transphobic rant against Gavin Newsom, as well as her plight against Don Lemon, directly contradicted this lens of a queer ally that a lot of people initially viewed Nicki through. Girl, mind you, I just literally got here. And I think what you notice in this moment with Nicki is similar to a lot of other individuals who identify as Christians over the last decade, have slowly but surely become more accepting of this Christian nationalist framework, even if they themselves do not fully ascribe to every aspect of Christian nationalism. By Nicki utilizing her celebrity and her social status to manufacture consent on behalf of somebody that is so obviously wants to be an imperialist. Like, Donald Trump wants to be a dictator. And the only thing that's stopping him from being a dictator is because we live in a democracy. Now, as a way to push back against Nicki Minaj becoming full MAGA, a lot of individuals have basically been pointing out how Nicki is an immigrant. I just want to point this out. Nicki Minaj is somebody that has lived in this country for years. Nicki came to this country when she was 5 years old. I bring this up to emphasize how Nicki Minaj has been a celebrity for a long time. So therefore, if she ever wanted to become a citizen, she definitely could. But she hasn't. So I asked myself, what could potentially be happening in the populace that makes Nicki Minaj want to become a citizen? As a way to push back against the petition that was signed to deport Nicki Minaj, Nicki posted that she received a Trump gold card. For some individuals, this was seen as a way to basically rationalize why exactly Nicki Minaj would be aligning with fascism. Maybe she was doing it because she needed access to a green card. Maybe Nicki was just working with the Trump administration just to gain access to a citizenship, something that Nicki Minaj could have gotten any part of her career. And again, I asked myself why. Why does Nicki Minaj feel the need to get a citizenship at this moment? I think I know the answer.
Prove anything. I'm just angry. I'm 7 years old. Angry.
The answer is because of ICE, something that Nicki Minaj, because of her wealth and status, would most likely not be impacted by. Nicki in this moment is exhibiting some of the worst attributes of the model minority myth within the immigrant community. Somebody that is willing to align with whiteness in order to prop themselves up or to prop up certain aspects of their community while turning their backs on other marginalized individuals. Individuals within the immigrant community, as well as marginalized people within her fan base, rightfully called out how Nicki was turning her back on the same exact community that she was from. A few weeks after Nicki aligned herself with Trumpism and MAGAism in regards to Nigeria, she started posting about the governor of California, her governor specifically. One of the things I have been genuinely confused about is Nicki Minaj's beef with Gavin Newsom. The reason I say this is not because I'm a fucking Gavin Newsom fan. That would be disgusting, God forbid. But I am genuinely confused as to why there's beef between Nicki Minaj and Gavin Newsom. Okay, first, in order for me to explain why exactly I'm confused about the Gavin Newsom shit, I have to explain what the Gavin Newsom shit is. According to Nicki Minaj, she has had beef with Gavin Newsom because Gavin Newsom specifically refused to assist her in regards to her swatting cases. If you don't know, Nicki over the last couple of years has had multiple incidents of swatting at her house, especially with a young child. But sadly, it seems as though that Gavin Newsom wasn't able to assist, which on the surface makes sense as to why Nicki is extremely, extremely upset with Gavin. Like, she's pissed off with Gavin. But the thing that doesn't make sense to me is the whole Megan's Law of it. Nicki's partner is somebody that is a registered SO. And because he's a registered SO, that means that Gavin Newsom, the governor of a state that has, I think, upwards to 40 million people, can't just make a caveat for this specific person. I understand that Nicki is in the elite echelon of the world, so she lives in a different world than we paupers do. But at the same time, we still live in a country with some framework of a law, especially for those that are not Donald Trump. So because of that, Gavin Newsom is unable to just take off her address from this list because her address needs to be publicly available because of the man she's married to. And one of the things you kind of notice with individuals in MAGA is there's no sense of accountability. It doesn't seem as though that Nicki is taking into account the fact that she herself decided to marry this nigga. And because she married this nigga, that's why her house and her address is publicly available. She refuses to acknowledge that at all. It just seems as though that the entirety of this beef with her and Gavin Newsom can be boiled down to grievance politics. She's upset that she asked Newsom for something. He was unable to do it because he's a governor. And instead of her taking accountability and potentially taking her ire and directing it towards the person that is most likely responsible for her address not being able to be taken off of that list, she instead wants to weaponize her celebrity against Gavin Newsom and weaponize her celebrity against trans people. If that's not the most loser shit I've ever heard in my life, I'm sorry. Any single time trans people get involved, I get very upset because I think anybody that is so much of a decrepit loser that is willing to jump on the backs of the most marginalized people, a loser. Simple. The fact that Nicki Minaj, somebody who is extremely powerful at this moment in her life, is using her platform to not only jump on the backs, of potential victims, but is also using her platform to attack the most marginalized within our community, just showcases how loser her politics have gotten post her hate train era. What you saw in this moment in regards to Nicki's crusade against Gavin Newsom is how she was willing to harm individuals within her own fan base in order to get back at Gavin Newsom. She started supporting J.D. Vance, somebody who would most likely be the Republican nominee against Gavin Newsom if, God forbid, he won the 2028 Democratic presidential campaign. Basically trying to prop up J.D. Vance and his assassin skills, something nobody has ever fucking said in their life, in order to make Gavin Newsom look bad, as a way to get her look back at Gavin Newsom. With starships blurring in the back, Nicki Minaj, standing at 5 foot, walked out onto the Turning Point USA stage. I feel as though the Turning Point USA moment with Erika Kirk was the moment where it kind of solidified and cemented the fact that this woman that most of us grew up with was now fully aligning herself with fascism. And I think the fact that she had her music blaring in the back was like you couldn't deny it anymore. The songs that you remembered from your childhood were now being used to push full-on fascism. Because even though a lot of us were kind of aware that Nicki was now aligning fully with fascism, that itself was a visual representation of Nicki's now full-on alignment with Donald Trump and MAGAism.
What have you, I mean, you're an amazing mother. What have you seen that has been a struggle for young women today? And then also, since both of us have little boys, I would love for you to also talk about the male side of that question as well.
Okay, well, something that I've noticed recently is that for little girls, I think that no matter how you look, we should be trying to instill into them to be proud of how they look. Recently, in the media, it's almost been like a push to, it's not just making young Black children feel proud of themselves, but it's almost like doing that and at the same time telling other children not to be proud of themselves. And I don't want any child feeling that way. If as Black women, we felt that we were not being represented and not being admired for our beauty, if we felt like that as Black women, why would we want to do that to other women?
Amen.
Within the midst of all of the backlash going on, Nicki Minaj, similar to Kanye West, is being re-examined within the Black community, specifically because Nicki, in this moment, is doing her best Candace Owens impression. And what I mean by that is, a lot of the politics and policies that Nicki is spewing on behalf of the Republican Party kind of mimic the talking points you usually hear from the Thomas Sowells of the world. In the midst of the transphobia and the homophobia, things that you would have never associated with the brand of Nicki Minaj prior to this moment, is she's grabbing from what I like to call the MAGA Grifter starter pack, which was created by the one and only Candace Owens. Nicki in this moment is exhibiting some of the worst attributes of certain animals with like tails, and how she's doing this specifically is just, it's embarrassing. Now, obviously, I'm not Patricia Hill Collins, so I can't give you the whole intersectionality shit. But one thing I want to point out about Nicki Minaj is that you may have not noticed is that Nicki is a Black woman. She is a Black woman, yes. I understand that some may think Nicki is just first generation Blasian, which means in this moment, her aligning with politics that directly impact both of those groups. Do you understand how many Black women are unemployed in the marketplace right now because of anti-DEI policies? She's obviously been called a thing you can't say on YouTube anymore, but she has been called it.
We know I can't say that.
Nicki, similar to Candace Owens, is a Black woman who is spewing anti-Black, anti-DEI talking points all under the guise of Being anti-woke. This all ties into the quote-unquote anti-wokeification of Nicki Minaj. In the early parts of her career, Nicki was very prominent in girl boss feminism. While sitting down with Erika Kirk, Nicki harped on this idea that Black women shouldn't be mean or jealous of white women, which directly contradicts some of Nicki's most impactful statements. For example, during the Anaconda era of Nicki Minaj's career, she directly confronted Miley Cyrus over her very dismissive take of how Black women's bodies are viewed in media in comparison to white women's bodies like Miley Cyrus.
Back to this bitch that had a lot to say about me the other day in the press. Miley, what's good?
Hey, we're all in this industry. We all do interviews, and we all know how they manipulate shit. Nicki, congratulations.
That's where you get the iconic Miley What's Good clip from. After Nicki dropped Anaconda, she was torn apart by conservative media, Fox News and Daily Mail, the same individuals that she's willing to align herself with at this moment. And in that moment, Nicki directly and rightfully confronted Miley Cyrus about how dismissive she was in regards to the plight of Black female artists in the industry and how their bodies get depicted differently than their white counterparts. Now, even though Nicki has her critiques of the Black community and why she believes that they have not stood up for her when she needed it, she has also benefited off of the hard work of Black women specifically and the Black queer community. So watching Nicki Minaj, who has benefited off of the community that has been provided by Black girls and Black queer people, now turning her back on those individuals, all because she wants to shuck and jive for Erika Kirk. Imagine telling Nicki Minaj in 2014 that she would be shucking and jiving for Erika Kirk. Now, I am not somebody that's apprehensive to the idea that Black people should potentially look for other parties to vote for. I honestly think the Democratic Party has taken the Black community's vote for granted. Now, if Nicki would have came out and said that she was supportive of Jill Stein, I may be a little annoyed, but I wouldn't have been extremely perturbed because Jill Stein, as feckless and as much of a loser as she is not really doing anything drastic like the Republican Party is. And Nicki in this moment aligning with the Republican Party specifically, especially at this moment. And the funniest thing about this is that the only reason Nicki Minaj is being invited into places like Turning Point USA is not because Erika Kirk is a huge Nicki Minaj fan. It's instead because MAGA wants direct access to her very impressionable fans. So in this moment, the group that Nicki is willing to dismiss, to throw under the bus in order to gain access to the Republican Party is the same exact group the white supremacists and white nationalists within MAGA are using her celebrity to gain access to. And I want to emphasize something. Black people, the Black community, is not harping on the Democrats because we think that they are fucking amazing. It's instead because we understand that this shit is mutually assured destruction and that by the Republicans having access to power, they are willing to weaponize the state, the federal state, against marginalized individuals, specifically the Black community. This is not a video in favor of the Democratic Party.
Nicki Minaj, Cardi B.
Okay, Nicki Minaj is causing dads to leave the home.
Hold on, I don't think that's a good role model for 18-year-old Black girls. I don't think that songs that are talking about like glorifying wet female genitalia is exactly, I don't know which one wrote that song. Which one was it?
I think it was Ben Shapiro.
After Nicki's allegations against Jay-Z, as well as Megan Thee Stallion's allegations against Tory Lanez, individuals like Anna Paulina Luna started latching on to these culture wars, started latching on to both of these specific issues within hip-hop. Please keep in mind that Anna Paulina Luna is a congresswoman from Florida. Similar to Candace Owens, comes from the Charlie Kirk School of Politics. And one of the main teachings of the Charlie Kirk School of Politics is using chasms within pop culture as a way to push Republican talking points. One of the things I want to mention is that Nicki, similar to other individuals that have done the full-on MAGA grift, seem to grasp for politics that feel very reactionary because they themselves don't have real politics. I honestly think Nicki just grabbed for the first MAGA grift pack and just went with the politics that she saw in there. There's not one doll in sight. Not one trans person in sight. Like, she's harping on 2024 politics because she's grabbing for the Candace Owens MAGA grift pack. Nicki can't vote. Nicki is not a citizen. Nicki doesn't have the ability to vote. Therefore, Nicki's advocacy for the SAVE Act is not being done on behalf of trying to protect votes or protect voters. The SAVE Act, a legislative act that is basically supposed to make it harder for marginalized people, specifically women, to vote. Because as we've seen in American politics, the Republican Party is trying to strip rights away from marginalized individuals and from women specifically. And it would potentially allow for the Republican Party to, if it passed, to win the 2026 midterm elections. As I've mentioned in the beginning of this video, Nicki Minaj is an undocumented immigrant, which means she can't vote. And not to be xenophobic, I obviously don't want to participate in xenophobia, but I want to harp on the fact that she can't vote. Nicki is using her platform to push bird politics like the SAVE Act just for the love of the game. Therefore, reaching heights that Mariah the Scientist can only dream of. Nicki is an elite, and I know that there's been some conversation about her finances, but she still is an elite. And in this moment, when Donald Trump is willing to do any and everything to kiss the ass of the elites, it makes sense why one of the richest people in the world would directly be aligned with a president that only cares about the wealthy and the oligarchy. And in this moment, you see, similar to all of the corporate CEOs that have decided to eat Donald Trump's ass for breakfast, Nicki Minaj is doing the same. Nicki Minaj decided to align with Donald Trump in 2026, which is just crazy to me. Because at this point, most of us are aware of how detrimental Donald Trump is, which means that she was aware of all of the heinous things the Trump administration was doing and decided, yes, I want to support that. I don't know if you guys noticed, like, we're in the midst of potentially having World War III, which means she doesn't even get to have a former Trump supporter arc. Like, this is the end. As we saw in 2024, celebrity endorsements do not equate to just winning, and they don't really drastically change the political landscape. So Nicki's endorsement or Nicki's association with specific individuals in MAGA does not mean that her Barbz are automatically going to be supportive of a piece of legislation or of the Republican Party. So let's talk about Miss Tyra Banks. I don't know if the lighting is good right here, but it's okay. While I was in the process of recording my little video for Miss Nicki Minaj, the documentary, the Netflix documentary for America's Next Top Model came out. And one of the things that I noticed, even though I have not finished the documentary, one of the things that I noticed was that a lot of my critiques for Tyra Banks were kind of eerily similar to a lot of my critiques for Miss Pink Wig herself, or Miss Onika Tanya. And a lot of that critique came from the fact that there's this, and it also shows a lot of the faults of that specific type of feminism. Because both Nicki and Tyra were entertainment ladder. Tyra claimed the purpose of America's Next Top Model was to expand diversity within the industry when it came to different body types. And Nicki is somebody that genuinely has a hierarchical view of the industry, and is somebody that genuinely believes in the idea of meritocracy. This is something you saw in regards to her battle with Cardi B. This idea that Cardi wasn't a real hip hop artist because Cardi B, insert promiscuous scandalous rumor here. And what I get from that is how Nicki is somebody that genuinely believes that she has not benefited from desirability politics. Now, obviously, look at Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj is an extremely gorgeous woman. And even in this moment where she's aligning with fascism, outside of the Erika Kirk makeup, is still extremely gorgeous, right? She is literally a first generation Blasian. She's up there with Jhené Aiko and Karrueche. And the way that she kind of talks about other female rappers makes it seem as though that they only have desirability politics to rely on. Now, keep in mind, Nicki Minaj is the same individual that made Anaconda. Without Nicki's Anaconda, there's no WAP. But instead of Nicki looking at that as like a monumental move forward, she instead sees it as those girls are less than me. And I think this again exhibits the bird politics of Nicki Minaj and how she started taking on the ideas of the industry as a way to try to push back against the expansion. Nicki, in a way, is exhibiting some of the toxic aspects of girl boss feminism. And it's not only these two women, that entire crop of Hillary Clinton feminists, women that utilize the system as a way to further propel themselves and utilize those specific topics as a way to further solidify their stance. Parallels between Tyra Banks and Nicki Minaj goes to show how there was a specific crop of women in the early 2000s that were willing to utilize feminist language and the facade of diversity as a way to further increase their standing within the entertainment industry. Now, one of the things that a lot of people have been asking is why exactly is Nicki receiving so much backlash compared to Diddy, who was recently convicted of such heinous crimes, or somebody like Jay-Z, who has been listed in the Epstein files? Why is Nicki receiving so much backlash compared to those two monumental figures within the industry? And honestly, it's because I know, say it with me. Patriarchy. Yep, it's patriarchy. And obviously, I'm not dismissing the actions of Nicki because I made this whole fucking video. So even though Diddy is still problematic, and even though Diddy should not have access to power once he gets out, he most likely will still have access to. The reason why somebody like Deion Cole can stand on that stage and directly combat and critique Nicki Minaj's actions, but refuses to make any type of comments in regards to Diddy, is because Nicki no longer participates in the industry politics that protect individuals like Diddy and Jay-Z from criticism. And this is not to make Nicki seem like a radical in any way, shape, or form, but Nicki throughout her career has always been on the other side of the industry. She never really played the industry games, and that is one of the main reasons as to why we saw that 2016 to 2019 hate train. Even though Diddy should technically be canceled, and even though Jay-Z does have a lot of weird allegations, Diddy and Jay-Z both have institutional power and access still. That does not mean that Nicki is a radical. That does not mean Nicki is somehow advocating against the industry. It just means that Nicki has never been good at networking. One of the main reasons as to why I made this video is to further examine how Nicki's politics have drastically changed over the last decade or so, and how she now buys into right-wing framing as a way to justify some of the harm that has been done to her by the industry, but also as a way to justify some of her unsavory actions. I want to emphasize something. Even though some may try to justify the actions of Nicki because of the animosity and the hate that she's received in the industry, none of that justifies the actions of Nicki Minaj. Because in this moment, Nicki Minaj is not only using her cultural cachet to get back at her ops, but also to harm the exact same fan base that we have been discussing throughout this video. The Barbz themselves are individuals who are directly impacted by the politics of the Trump administration. And they themselves have given not only their money, but their time in order to hoist up the legacy of Nicki Minaj. But in this moment, in search of grievance politics, in search for community outside of the industry she exists in, Nicki is not only willing to throw those individuals under the bus, she's also willing to use that parasocial connection that she has garnered with the Barbz as a way to push extremist policies like Donald Trump bombing Nigeria, or the passage of the SAVE Act, which would most likely impact those that are within her fan base, or just co-signing any and every action of the Trump administration, policies that would most likely impact the same exact fan base that has done all of this work on behalf of Nicki. What you see in this moment is a woman that is not only a victim of the system, but is also a tool of the system. Somebody who is willing to use their cultural capital and their standing in pop culture as a way to further push harmful politics and policies on their extremely impressionable fan base. MAGA is not in awe of Nicki's celebrity. They are in awe of her parasocial connection between her and the Barbz. And for a Republican Party, which would most likely be impacted bigly within the upcoming midterm elections, they need as many people on board as possible. So using Nicki and her grievance politics as a vehicle to try to gain access to her extremely parasocial fan base, well, obviously, MAGA was up for the case. In this moment, what you see is a woman who has been a giant amongst men, willing to dwindle her celebrity and her cultural cachet to a Turning Point USA summit. Like, watching Nicki in this current iteration of her career has been so weird to watch, because in her pursuit of grievance politics, she's willing to dismiss the legacy that she now benefits from. In her sit down with Erika Kirk, the obvious grieving widow of Charlie Kirk, as you can tell, Nicki was willing to dismiss all of the cultural legacy that she has in order to kiss the ass of Erika Kirk. Erika fucking Kirk. Erika Kirk, who looks like a bootleg cast member from The Real Housewives of New Jersey. That Erika Kirk. That is who Nicki is willing to jump out the gates for. This should help you understand how Nicki Minaj, the icon, the GOAT, and the legend, has become radicalized in her politics, that she's willing to dismiss her own cultural legacy for access to a rotting corpse. If that doesn't exemplify the full-on radicalization of Nicki Minaj, I don't know what does. Good luck, America.
Hi, my name is Nicki Minaj and I go to PS45. I like to be a nurse when I grow up so I can help people less fortunate than I.